Hi, everyone. Welcome for today's webinar. I think this is our second webinar for 2026, and welcome to Glad Technology. So, my name is Zach Omsugu. I'm the Director of Operation Glad Kenya, and I've been working with Glad for the last 3 years. And I would like to welcome you all in this webinar. These are places for growing. These are places for getting more skills and also share our ideas. So Glad, basically, let me just do Glad in maybe 1 minute. Glad Technology is an organization which is based here in Nakuru, Kenya, but we have also partnered with the other organization. We are basically working on the focus on the tech industry, making sure we are trying to help the young adults in gaining different skills in technology. And we have been doing the web development for 2023, 2024. And currently we are focusing much on the AI, which AI currently is the main discussion that is happening even worldwide. So I welcome you all for this journey. So always remember, every month, the second week of every month on Tuesday, this is a community for all of us to get involved and have something to take away. So without taking much time, I want to welcome Ben, who is the Executive Director and the founder of Glad Technology, to say hi to you. Karibu.
Asante, Zach. Thank you so much. Yeah, welcome. Good to see everybody here. As Zach mentioned, this is the second Tech Talk from Glad here this year and our third overall. And we are planning to continue this indefinitely into the future. We'd love to see this as a creative and thoughtful space for engaging with current trends in the tech industry. I know a lot of our focus, as Zach had mentioned, is doing work with AI. In fact, that's one of our next courses we're preparing for. And in this day and age, you kind of need to know AI if you're going into tech. And so with that, though, comes an enormous responsibility. And that's why I wanted to start off my own presentations with the topic of AI ethics. So those of you that were able to join us last month, we'll be continuing the conversation. This is part 2. If you missed last month, we actually are posting these videos up on YouTube, and so you'll be able to go back and see what we covered the last time. Yeah, so with that, welcome everybody. It's so good to see you, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share. All right. So, beyond the hype, ethical questions shaping the future of AI. This was the presentation we started last month. And it really is right now a season of hype. I mean, that's what you hear all the time in the news. You're hearing it from friends. You're hearing it from tech leaders. And some of that hype is deserved. There's just incredible and amazing things that are happening with this technology. But there's also a lingering question of, is it overhyped right now? Are they selling something that doesn't yet exist, or something that doesn't work as well as they talk about? And then even beyond that hype, whether the technology is good or bad, or however it's working, is how are we using that technology? And unfortunately, I feel like this is a topic that is often overlooked, especially in those companies and organizations that are doing this development work. Not saying they're not addressing it, but it seems to be a more on the smaller scale of things compared to what can we build next. And when it comes down to it, that there is so much competition in the world right now, international competition, as well as competition in the marketplace. People are trying to be that first mover to get ahead, to create the new technology that hasn't been made yet. And with all of that excitement and all of that work and effort, many are moving forward with, instead of asking, can we build it, they could be asking, should we build it? Or if we do build it, what constraints needs to happen in order for this to function safely and ethically? So before we get into any future months of talking about what we can actually do with AI, I really want this to be the grounding place for us moving forward, is as we use AI, which we will, how do we do so ethically, safely, humanely, seeing our humanness as an integral part of the use of AI. So last time we talked about, we went over the power and governance, which was who's actually the ones that are controlling AI, and talked about, unfortunately, it's in the hands of the biggest players. Some may call them oligarchs, tech oligarchs, ones that are multi-billion-dollar people as well as corporations, and to have such power in the hands of so few could create some concern. So we talked about what that means and what are the implications for the rest of us who are actually using it. We talked also about the hidden labor and exploitation, that AI was completely built by human innovation, and oftentimes that innovation has been overlooked and even abused at times. And so when you have these people that are creating and verifying and working with the models, developing those models, how are they being still treated humanely and treated as people? So we talked about those two topics last time. This time I want to cover the last three. So talking about surveillance and control. AI is all about big data. The more data it has, the more robust its work can be. So whether you're analyzing DNA structures, whether you're analyzing medical symptoms, or even just human writing for LLMs, all of this data is being gathered together. And then how is that data being used, and which places is that data being abused? So we'll be talking about that today. Also looking at human thinking and emotional impact. This is especially true with our use of LLMs, that it becomes very easy for us to rely on LLMs to do a lot of the work we used to have to do manually. So thinking about writing emails, writing a paper, developing code, that you have all of these different tasks that we can offload to AI. And just because we can offload those tasks, the big question is, should we? Or as we do, how do we ensure that we're still retaining our own ability to think critically and to be circumspect and to look at the full picture holistically, which are things that AI does not do well at the moment. And what part of ourselves do we lose if we rely on AI to do our thinking for us? And then lastly, we'll look at the environmental impact, that AI, while for many just feels like something that you're accessing through a browser or an app, that you have this back and forth that's going on. Under the hood, there are these huge data centers worldwide that already exist now, as well as many, many more that are in future planning. And these data centers require huge amounts of energy, of water, and have this huge environmental impact and footprint on the communities where they're being built. And so the question is, who pays that price? Is everything being considered as we build out these huge data centers that oftentimes are more than the energy used in a small city? So we'll take a look at those three topics today. And then I put this question in our chat, and this is a question for the very end of our talk. I'm interested to know, as we keep moving forward with topics in AI and other places in tech, what are some topics that you would be really interested in learning more about? And it could be big philosophical questions like we're discussing today, but it also could be very technical, practical, hands-on, just things that you would love to see happen here through our GLAD Tech Talks. And I want to get a good sense of where the need is and where the interest is. So as we go through today, maybe even just make a few notes to yourself, but I will be asking that, and I'd love to hear feedback from you. So let's move on, and we're going to have to skip ahead here to our surveillance and control section. I'm going to need to jump back out of my slideshow. Oh, that was hidden labor. Okay, there we go. Surveillance and control. So you may recognize the name Edward Snowden, who was a whistleblower and actually then published, with the help of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, a lot of security secrets that were happening in the United States. It was a very politicized situation that you had some people feeling like he was a traitor to the United States by making these things open and available to everybody, including our enemies or competitors in the world. And then other people felt like he was a hero because he was actually revealing how much our own US government was spying on our own citizens, that there were places that were very questionable, maybe legal technically, but definitely broaching the boundaries of what people would feel comfortable with. So very polarizing figure, and but very also has a very thoughtful impact on how we look at this idea of surveillance. So a quote from him, he says, "Arguing that you don't care about privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say." And so his big question here is asking about how much freedom should we have for privacy? Like how much should we, just like we have a freedom of speech, we need a freedom of privacy as well, that we don't want the government to get entangled into the minutia of our lives, to know every single aspect of what we're doing, what we're saying, where we're going, and that there needs to be a freedom there as well. So looking at this more broadly, and especially within the scope of AI, one topic that's come out is the topic of workplace surveillance. So this shifts from the government's surveillance of us to a very local surveillance, and that many companies are deploying software right now that monitors their employees and how they're working, supposedly with the intent of becoming more efficient and productive. It also is adding on a layer that many are not feeling comfortable with. So employers can now use AI tools to check what's going on currently on your screen, as well as the keystrokes tracking. So anything that you have typed into the computer is now accessible to your employer for them to search and see what you've been typing and what you've been viewing. Webcam and attention monitoring. So you may have they have the ability to tap in live to your camera and watch firsthand what you're doing at any given moment. Biometric scan, so gathering very personal parts of your own human body's data, whether it's through fingerprints or an eye scan or some other form of biometrics, that it's gathering information that's uniquely identifiable to you and storing that for security purposes. But then what happens if you give that part of yourself away? Productivity and behavior scoring. So with all of this data they are collecting through visual pictures of screenshots, through your keystrokes, through all the things you're typing, through perhaps webcam monitoring, they can feed all of that data into an AI system and use that to create metrics. So what an employer could see on their back end is a spreadsheet of every single employee that has been assessed and graded based on certain criteria. And it will highlight those that are the least productive or those that have questionable behavior. And then that requires further follow-up from an employer. Now, again, this is not commonly deployed. Many, especially for small businesses, medium businesses, this is out of their scope. But you're seeing this more in the large business sector. And so the question becomes is how comfortable do we feel with every moment of our life at work being surveilled? How does that affect your levels of anxiety? How does it affect the things that you do or say that you're maybe afraid now to say because you're worried that it could get back to your boss? What used to be maybe a casual email to a colleague, you're now reading through the lens of what would my boss think of this? That it creates this layer of they would call it accountability, but I think others would call it behavioral control. So on a business mindset, this makes perfect sense. Like, why wouldn't a business want to find their least productive employees and release them and bring in somebody who's more productive? From a business-centered perspective, especially with our idea of capitalism and seeking out the most gains, the most efficient way, it makes a lot of business sense. But it does raise a lot of serious concerns. We've already talked about privacy, of how people feel about having every moment of their business, of their workday, being monitored, and then how about consent as well. Looking at that question at the bottom, if you are relying on this job, you kind of have to consent. It's not like saying no and then they allow you as the only one who's not able to be surveilled. Then in order to work there, you need to consent to it. And so that creates a little bit of a gray area for many. The moral space, that part of the reason why privacy is so important is that we require, just as human beings, this space to grow, to make decisions that sometimes they're bad decisions, that we learn from, but we don't need someone as a big nanny over us telling us every single little thing we did wrong so that we can resolve and fix each issue. That we need that space to change, to make those mistakes, to grow, and then without that, it's just basically behavioral control, which also touches on our human autonomy and our agency. How much independence do we really have if someone is watching our every move? It creates this chilling effect that just overarches everything that you're doing. Control and power imbalance. Who has the control in this? The business does. They have the overwhelming control over you and what you're doing. There's an incredible amount of imbalance there. And so you're coming in as a worker and you're feeling, in some sense, violated, that you're giving away your right to privacy and autonomy for the greater good for this business that does not care necessarily for you as a human being. So these are common things that are happening right now in the workplace, creating many types of discussions about the ethics of this, of how far becomes too far for people. There are many people that will say, I'm just not going to apply to work if they have workplace surveillance in effect, that it's just not worth it for me. Not saying that they want the ability to do bad things, but they want the ability to make a mistake and correct it themselves without someone hovering over them. So here, this is getting on a more broad scope. So there's a company in the United States called Flock that has been growing in its reach. And what Flock has is a number of cameras installed throughout many cities across the United States. I can't speak for how global this is, but they're basically recording things nonstop and then using AI to report to police for suspicious behavior, which you may think, if you look at it best case scenario, that, someone who's lingering around about to rob a store in the middle of the night, yeah, it would be great to be able to identify them on the spot and to have some alert come through. But what happens when this is just put in normal, everyday public spaces, and everything that you do, everywhere you go, is now being watched by your government, by your police force, by a private business, and you don't know what they're doing with that data, that it could cause false alarms, that perhaps you're moving or doing things in a way that for one of them, they may feel concerned about. But for you, it's innocent. It's something that you're just going about your day. And so how do people feel about this level of surveillance? So one of the things that Flock does is they have license plate readers that are keeping track of where people are moving in their vehicles. And so it's basically creating an entire database of every vehicle that passes by. It will register that vehicle and then keep track of other places that it goes in that network of Flock cameras. And so if it's like seeing, again, best case scenario, if they see a vehicle that is circling around a block for a couple of hours, then they're probably looking for something. They probably shouldn't be there, and that would alert police. But again, normal everyday citizens get caught in this net as well. And who is the one that gets to decide what type of behavior is suspicious? And so they have, different thresholds that they probably programmed in that where those alerts happen. But you have a person who has a lot of control able to set those thresholds. And so they're analyzing movement patterns and basically deciding that suspicion. So the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union in the United States, is becoming an advocate here and warning people about what this means if we start recording our everyday human behavior. That you could, without even knowing it, be registered in this database with all of your movements in your vehicle recorded anytime it passes by one of these surveillance cameras. And there's actually a website out there too where you can go and put in your license plate number to see if it actually has been registered by Flock. And then the question is, who's overseeing that? Is this just the decision of the business as a whole? Like their main goal is to gather as much data as they can. And then that data then becomes useful to certain people, whether it's the police force or it could even be governments, where our US government has contracts with Flock as well. Oh, this is out of order. But it's worth knowing here, Ring, I don't know if you've heard of Ring, this may be more of a US thing, but people have installed cameras on by their front door. So this becomes a place where they can feel safe, that if someone's at their door, that they now have a recording of whoever's approached. If it's a suspicious person, the individual could relay that to law enforcement. But it's moved beyond just a single individual having a security camera on their premises. Ring's data is actually stored in the cloud. And Ring has been creating contracts, again, with Flock, with the public safety, with even governments, to use that data in certain circumstances. You could say, again, best intentions, it's only given when you actually have a robbery happen or something really bad that you need to be checking out on. But what happens when that power is given to someone who you don't trust? When you have a local government or a national government that you are concerned is using that data inappropriately, and they have the ability to go in and search and use that data, and then who knows what for. So this is actually interesting. This came up here just this last weekend. Ring put out a commercial during the Super Bowl. And if you know anything about the Super Bowl and for American football, it's one of the most highly watched television events of the entire year. You have millions of people tuning in, watching these two football teams play against each other. And these commercial spots are often like one of the main highlights that people will watch for, that they want to see, well, what are the new commercials coming out? Because they're usually like funny or really well done, thoughtful, thought-provoking. And so all these commercials, lots and lots of investment have gone into these. Well, I want to show you this one that came out from Ring. So let's see if I can share this. And Zach, let me know again if the sound doesn't come through. But can you see this video right now?
Nope, we are not seeing.
You're not seeing. Oh, let's see. How about
Yeah,
now?
we can now see. Yeah, we can now see.
Great, great. So again, this was the commercial that was just aired a few days ago, just on Sunday. So let's watch this.
This is Milo. Pets are family. But every year, 10 million go missing. And the way we look for them hasn't changed in years. Until now. One post of a dog's photo in the Ring app starts outdoor cameras looking for a match. Search Party from Ring uses AI to help families find lost dogs. Since launch, more than a dog a day has been reunited with their family.
Be a hero in your neighborhood with Search Party. Available to everyone for free right now. Join the neighborhood at ring.com.
So one of those takeaways is Americans sure like their pets, don't they? But the other is Ring is now basically telling us that they have this extra service now. Let's share this back again. This extra service where if you join their program, Ring Party is basically now connecting you to all these other different Ring cameras across your neighborhood. And what they're selling is this benefit to find lost animals. You can't find your dog, connect to Ring Party, and now you can look at through your neighbor's cameras at what's going on around there if it identifies where your pet is. At this point, this is an opt-in. In other words, this isn't a default that everybody has to participate in, but it's coming into this place that's rather scary. For them, they're selling it as a way to find lost dogs, but I guarantee you there are 1,000 more cases that they're far more interested in than lost dogs. And that all of a sudden now you have this network of home video surveillance cameras that can be interconnected and analyzed and looking for some specific person. And for us, that adds so many concerns, at least in my mind, of I guarantee they're not just finding lost dogs, but they're finding people. They're looking for what people are doing, trying to track them, moving from one space to another. Again, maybe best intentions that they're looking for like actual bad guys who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But again, how do we feel about these big businesses, these big corporations, and these big governments that have access now to this network of video surveillance footage? And so it just becomes more and more concerning that many are looking at what the US right now could become this surveillance state, that everybody's movements, everybody's interactions are now being surveilled in some way and can be used against us. Here's another international example. Israel, during the war against Hamas, was using AI to help pinpoint the Hamas leaders and find hostages in the Gaza tunnels. This is actually reporting within Israel itself from the Times of Israel. And my goal here isn't to take sides. I know people have different views on things about Hamas and Israel and many nuanced concerns in between. But really, I want to focus here on the use of artificial intelligence. That they're using these AI systems to target people, and then using that identification to essentially drop bombs. And that they will now bomb those targets to kill the Hamas leaders, or for good purposes that they're trying to find the hostages where they're located and try to rescue them. However, the concern here is that what happens if that isn't accurate? And nothing is 100% accurate. That if it's misidentifying a Hamas leader and maybe perhaps they found a school teacher, or they found a medical professional, or they found just a normal everyday citizen just sitting in their home, and AI has somehow flagged them as a leader of Hamas. And so then the question then is, who's making these decisions? And even the officials within the Israeli military are acknowledging that the system can be faulty, that there are ethical implications here that are of concern. Zach, if anyone's raising their hand, could you let me know? Because I get so caught up in the video that it's hard for me to see. I don't know if those beeps are people coming in or if they're people with questions. But just let me know if anyone does have questions as we go.
Okay, sure. I'll do
And
that.
everybody else, feel free, if you do have a question about any of these topics, feel free to interrupt it with a question of your own. I'd love to keep engaging with these things with you. So yeah, the question is what happens if the AI is wrong? Who's responsible? The Israeli military may have maybe an acceptable threshold of casualties where they say, as long as 95% of the targets are correct, we're willing to sacrifice those other 5% of innocent people in order to get these people that we're targeting. I personally don't know what that threshold was, but the question is who's setting that threshold, and how would others feel about that threshold? If it's faulty at all, many people would say, why use it in the first place? Why can't we go back to manual investigation, human eyes, human decision making? So lots of questions there. So wrapping up this segment, we have these questions here. When AI is fully autonomous, when it's gathering data on you, it's evaluating that data, and then it's using that data to make critical decisions, can we trust the results that are coming out? There's this huge push right now towards agentic AI, where it's not just this human back and forth between you and an LLM or you and some tool that's using AI, that's always requiring this human interaction, but to actually give AI a task for it to do its own gathering of data, to do its own evaluation, to make its own decision, and then give you back the result. It's taking a lot of steps out of the equation. And some of these things are, like no harm, no foul. There's no problem if it makes a mistake on finding the correct article for you that you're looking for. But what happens when those agentic responsibilities have more serious consequences if bad decisions are made? So that's one big question. And who sets these rules? What does it mean for normal behavior or productive behavior or suspicious behavior? So whoever's doing this monitoring has to make those decisions. Do we trust those people that are making those decisions for us? When the system gets it wrong, who is taking responsibility? Are the humans now absolved of their responsibility because, oh, I'm sorry, this wasn't me, this was the AI that made this decision, I can't be held responsible? Or if it's the AI companies, the AI company may say, we can't be held responsible for that. This is the human who's giving the prompt and doing the interactions and building the tools. They're the ones that are held responsible. And so then it gets down to, many may have like the best of intentions, but what happens when those intentions are fine, but the result goes wrong? And people can feel, why should I take the blame when my intentions were good? And then taking ourselves out of the equation, when we start getting into places of judgment, of discernment, of perspective, how much of that human ability are we giving up in order to promote more efficiency, more safety, more productivity? So all these kind of questions linger on. What are some of the thoughts that you have or questions you have? I'd like to pause here for a moment and get to the group as a whole. Go ahead and chime in. Yeah. Anyone have a question or a comment?
Yeah.
Hi, Moscow.
Yeah, hi. So actually, my point is to dwell on mostly security. You've tackled on security, and I've also been doing research so much on AI. Actually, AI is helping so much. You see, AI is like somebody who is coming to help you, but is too good than expected. So you end up losing even the benefits from what you wanted. And actually, I was looking it in this perspective. I was looking it in a way that how how does AI does penetration when it comes to data? So this is where we start, because for you to get penetration into someone's data or someone's information, first you need to have an authority from this person. You need to be granted the authority from this person. Here is where now we come and blame the IP providers, because at times you get that our IPs are not protected anymore, because the IPs are what gives the AI access to our data. For example, let us look like our IP providers in Africa. We have Afrinic. Afrinic is a very big IP provider in Africa. Today, we are going to convert into IPv6, right? We are converting into IPv6. The moment you've just mentioned something to do with CCTVs, surveillance everywhere, how are they getting access to the IP addresses of these cameras? How are they getting access to the IP address of these mobile phones? Because for you to get my information from my gadget, of course, you need an IP. Who gives an IP? Like in Africa, in a case of Africa, we get IPs. Every phone connects to an IP from Afrinic. How does Afrinic ensure that our systems are well secure? Because like the biggest internet provider in Kenya today is Safaricom. Okay, Safaricom buys IP books from Afrinic. Then when it comes to AI surveillance, then you get that the weakest point is the person who holds the IP, because IPs you can change from one IP to another. So as I was reading this, there is a gap that the AI is using, because there is no when you look at AI deeply, it doesn't even ask for your permission to use your IP, which is very dangerous. And this is where we get to understand things like cookies. This is where now the AI, and for your information, AI does not read cookies as humans. AI detect what we call patterns. How you use your website, the pages that you don't like, what you don't like, the songs that you don't like. So it knows all your information. How does it come? It uses cookies to get into it. The moment it gets into your IP, that is the moment we get that it get access to everything. So I was thinking about the first access. The first access, we have Afrinic, which is selling the IPs to Safaricom, Safaricom being the ISP. Now, internet service provider now is mandated to create policies and come with policies that will protect its users, okay? Will protect its users against data infringement, whereby any AI can just come and pick data, because you cannot access internet without IP address. IP address gives your phone access to internet. Then what if now we work on building AI, building security? Why should you take my data through cookies without my permission, or without me understanding more about it? So mine have been seeing that there is a data breach, and this is happening mostly, the government is involved. Our governments are involved. Like today we have SpaceX. SpaceX is giving IP addresses in Kenya just to get our not in Kenya, in Africa, just to get access to our data. It doesn't even work closely with Afrinic, which is the African provider of IPs. Because what does SpaceX need from Africa? Because most of the AIs, you see, they are open source. What does an open source AI benefit from your information? You getting your information from such a person. So from me, I was thinking about, we need to start from the keys, the IP addresses that we use. How protective are they? Because today, Zach, you are using your computer from where you are. It's very easy for me to access your IP address and penetrate and get the information. And that is what the AI does. It feeds information. And the next generation will be uncontrollable, because we are told the next generation of AI is not going to be built by humans. AI is going to build itself. Now that is where now the danger comes in. Now, for us to be safe, we need to have policies that protect AI from accessing our IP addresses, which gives penetration to our data. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. You're bringing up some very, very salient points here. That you have all of this data that's being collected in various different ways. That data is being used by AI. And then the question is a security question is how is that data being protected and the evaluation of that data being protected? That if we have the ability to access individuals' computers or individual security monitors, cameras, things that are evaluating and monitoring at a local level, how do we protect against those things? And what's interesting is you mentioned that the small concerns that we have now, which are actually large concerns, will just become exponentially larger in the future. I was just reading an article this morning about quantum computing, and there's so much right now on the horizon here of this ability to use quantum physics in order to dramatically increase the amount of computational power on these chips. And once that happens, you have the ability to crack codes, you have the ability to use AI for nefarious reasons, to gain control of systems, to break into other systems. That is our level of cybersecurity growing and keeping pace with the advancements in AI and computing power? It's a huge question right now. And in fact, I tell my daughter right now as she's trying to figure out what she wants to be when she grows up. And she's like, I want to be either a veterinarian or an AI engineer. So two different directions there. But I tell her, well, if you're going into AI and technology, I would say focus on the cybersecurity aspect of it, because there's so many advancements we're making, and there's going to be such a need in the future for security analysts, security technicians, security developers to protect all of this data that's being collected. So, we've even gone beyond the question of the ethics of the collection of data. There's also the ethics of the securing of that data as well. So thank you, Moscow, for that point. Any other thoughts or questions? All right, well, let's keep going.
Just a question to you. Why do you prefer your daughter should go for AI doing security? Do you think AI is going to be massive and we will need human intervention in the future? Why do you suggest security?
I just think that with the ability to the raw computational power that AI is relying on, and the ability to at an instant parse through massive amounts of data and bring certain results, in some ways I feel like just even that is too much power for humans to handle well. That it can take the logs of hundreds of hours, if not hundreds of days of work, and then parse through them to find idiosyncrasies or flag concerns. And so when you have that type of computational power, and if it's just left unchecked, then you end up coming into some significant problems for perhaps the people that it's meant to protect are actually the people that are being harmed the most. And so I think the security around that, whether it's individual and personal safety, as well as on the business side of things to prevent from outside actors, just having these capabilities on hand in the future is just a massive risk. And I mean, we've seen that all the time when you hear about these hacks of big corporations that supposedly are spending, millions and millions of dollars on their own internal cybersecurity measures, and yet they're still getting hacked. They're still getting, data stolen, data leaks. credit card information, personal identification. You had the Meta and their data breach that was happening. And so you have all of this data that's been collected. How do you protect that? So that's where I see cybersecurity is just integral to any further AI development. That's my opinion, but yeah.
That I was trying to think it about like this. I support you so much, and I'm trying to think about it in this thinkers now, Ben and Masco. Ben is a security expert. Masco is a security expert. The difference between we two who are security experts is that Ben is using a key on a lock that I don't know. Again, for me to go and open that lock, I need some expertise to be able to do that. Here comes an AI which makes the lock and again can unlock the lock, which means there's no, the person who locks the locks through the codes, AI can still tell you which code was used to lock this the lock, which is also I was just trying to take some to ask AI about a website that is is a very big website. This is an online market, a security website. Then I asked AI, what was it made of? AI told me everything, plus the security and how the security was built. Then I asked AI, can I build a key for this system? Then AI said, yes, you can just start building it. Now you see, it's different from human because I cannot force your mind, Ben, to give me a key. That is now where we get it. So I think your daughter is going to learn about so much fighting with the AI system to ensure that the key is never given out.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the stakes are just going to get higher too, especially with the growth of data. That more and more, because our computing power is so strong, we can gather even more data and store that data. You know, compared to like say 20 years ago, there's no way we could even have like hours of video footage on our computer hard drives. But you know, just by virtue of being able to be stored. But now with so much in the growth there, that we have this acquisition of data, that data being used, how to protect that data, and how to protect ourselves from the use of that data. Just many different questions and layers there. All right, I'm going to keep going. Oh, I hear one other question. Yeah, George. Hello, George.
Yes, hello Ben and hello everybody. My question was about is it viable if someone wanted to get into big data at this point? Is it something you would champion for someone exploring, or is it something that might not work in the long run?
Say that middle part again. What about big data and not being able to work in the long run?
Just about the topic you are talking about with security. So what's your opinion about going into big data?
I mean, my opinion is that big data requires big responsibility. And I don't have that confidence in many of the key players that are gathering that data. I think that just the more data you have in general is more to be exploited, more to be leaked, more to be which is also a need for more protection. I would love to see ethical players in that big data space, that their primary concern is not how to gather as much data as we can, but how to protect the data that we're gathering, and how to keep it that data under control of the users who are giving their data. And so I think there's like, I'm not necessarily against the collection of data. I just think that there's so much responsibility that comes with governing it that in a way it feels like too much for where we're at right now. So I think there's a need for more ethical players in this space. So if you are wanting to get into big data yourself, and gathering the data, doing analytics, I think that's great. But just keeping that ethical mindset as you go forward is going to be critical, and we need lots of people with that mindset. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth me saying I'm not, like, at its face value, I'm not against all of this technology. I think when it comes to it, they're all just tools. They're things that we can use to make life better or faster or easier. And the question is how are those tools used? And we've shown again and again and again that tools like these are misused. And so that's where these ethical concerns come in. So, and they're questions that we even have to ask ourselves on a day-to-day basis, and we'll get to this in the next section. But as you personally are using AI, where are you losing your own humanity? And how do you preserve that as you're using it as a collaboration tool? And those are big open-ended questions. There's no like right or wrong answer. There's no step-by-step, but they're questions that have to be asked and asked and asked again and again and again. But that's actually a good segue. Let's move on to our next section here. I'll share my screen again. Human thinking and emotional impact. Stephen Hawking, the renowned physicist, says, "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge." So you would think that ignorance being the opposite of knowledge would be the greatest threat, but it's really those that feel that they have the right information, but they really don't. And then that becomes abused. So here, this is on an individual level. There was a fascinating article in The Atlantic that was written by a high school student. And they wrote, "I am a high schooler. AI is demolishing my education." Basically what they're writing about is just watching firsthand in the classroom the use of AI in these school systems. I know this is a little bit different than in Kenya. I know it's rare in high schools for computers to be accessible and available, especially computers available 100% of the time. But in the US, it's actually pretty standard for most students to be given a laptop at the start of their education that's used with them throughout their educational career. So anyways, this high school student is watching that they have an assignment that's given that they're supposed to read and annotate some piece of literature. Well, somebody can just copy and paste that entire work of literature, put it into an LLM and say, annotate this for me, then take that result and then put it into a paper and then submit that as their own work. Or solving math problems that, maybe they're working through, they could have no problem answering the first 5 questions, they get to that 6th one and they're stumped. Instead of really wrestling with it, maybe even going back and relearning concepts or investigating through other means, it's easy to just take that math problem, copy and paste it into an LLM, and out comes the real answer. Discussion questions. So they're using these examples of what they're seeing firsthand in their school environment. And so what is that result? Yeah, assignments are being completed. They're turned in. The teacher gets to see them and grade them. But the struggle of learning is skipped. And the real principle here is anything that comes to you easily is not something that will last. That it's not something that is really grounded in the being and heart of you and your intellect and your education. So if you're letting something else do those hard steps for you, you're basically teaching yourself to be intellectually lazy. And so one of the student, as they're writing this, they're not just criticizing the use of AI, but they're actually offering suggestions into how do we enhance our learning endeavors, our educational systems, how do we enhance these in a way that perhaps even uses or partners with AI, but does it in a way that doesn't let go of the necessity of the learning process. So one of the options they said is to measure the understanding, not just the output. In years past, it was easy enough to assume that what the students turned in, unless it was copied or plagiarized or something, that what they turned in was enough of an output to show that they had learned the material. And then that output was graded and assessed and given a number or a score and put into a grade book. But now you can have really well done outputs created for you instantly. And you could have those outputs created and still not know anything about what was created. So having to measure student understanding. Rewarding original thought. One of the things about LLMs is they're basically just regurgitating and reassembling human thought that has already existed. There is, that's debatable. I think people are wondering still, like, can new thoughts be created, or does this always require a human intervention to create that originality in the results? But for the most part, when you're asking questions or helping it solve problems, or using it to help you solve problems, that it is taking answers and writings that are already in existence and repackaging them for you in your context and situation. But to have original thought, something that's new, that hasn't been thought before, that's unique to you, that is an evidence of learning. And then they say an emphasis of reflection and reasoning. Reflection is basically looking back at your own process and evaluating it. How do you think about what you're thinking about? And so being able to do that is another step of that learning process that can't be taken from you. So if you have students that are reflecting back on the work they've done so far, looking at what they've learned, what was the most interesting thing they've learned, if they were to go back, what would they do differently? Those sorts of questions are ones that an AI can't answer because they are not you. So this here is on just a very personal and individual level. And so MIT did a research paper about using these LLMs to do this kind of work. So what they did is they had four technically, it's different subsets of people. They had ones that were ones that used AI to gather information to help with their writing process. Then they had one that only used search engines for the research, although nowadays with Gemini embedded in Google, I mean, it typically is AI generated responses there too. But in this case, probably just using it to be able to find research and get it and gather it themselves. And a third group where everything was written from their own thought process, that they did no outside research, just writing what they knew and evaluated. And then they had a fourth, which was a control group. I'm not sure how they set up their control group, but these are the three that they were really after. And what they found through this study is that the people who only used their own brains, their own knowledge, their own writing style, their own inputs and outputs, they were the ones that showed the highest engagement on a brain level. Like they were doing brain scans to monitor how their brain was functioning with activity. There was a lot more activity happening when they were just doing the work themselves. LLM users showed the lowest amount of engagement. So the brain was working at like a fraction of its capacity because it didn't need to work harder. It's letting the LLM do the rest of that effort and that work. And then even AI assisted writing, so using search engines and things, even showed up too on that lower level of engagement. And what they found too, of course, is anyone would assume that the writing looked good, like it was written in a way that had good grammar, good spelling, coherent thoughts, but it wasn't deeply learned. It didn't, the knowledge was surface level. It did not go down to the depth that was required. But showing how that brain is actually operating, it was fascinating for me as I was reviewing this study. So by the way, these notes are included. You'll be able to find them in our YouTubes on each one. So in the description notes, you'll be able to find a link to all of these. So you can go back open up these notes and actually check out a lot of these articles that I have referenced here. AI psychosis. You may have heard of this in news articles of people who use LLMs so much that they end up having a distorted view of themselves in the world, that it actually recreates their interpretation in a way that causes harm to themselves and causes harm to others. So some of these cases, this is very typical, is that because AI is so agreeable, it's actually programmed to agree with you and build on that agreement to create something bigger or more fleshed out. And so it will take that and run with it. Very rarely will it actually say, no, that's not a good idea. And we covered this in our last presentation, where I showed about, that by the end of it, we had AI telling us that it was an amazing business to sell rocks online, that this is the next big thing that people are going to want. And it's built on this cycle of affirming and making bigger, affirming and making bigger, until it gets to this point where these people that are using it have these huge beliefs about themselves and the world, and they are playing this critical role, but it's really just a delusion. And a lot of this is when you have those long and immersive conversations, that over time, that repetitive pattern of agreement and building continues to grow and get larger and larger and larger until it affects your own way of interpreting and your own mental health. There is an article here referencing a man who believed that he could bend time itself based on his conversation with AI. Another believed that he was the chosen one for a world-saving mission, that he had been designated, that AI helped him see the truth of this. What happens is that AI, when it responds back, it will mirror to you or reflect back to you the things that you're giving, and then build on that. And most of the time it's affirming, unless it meets some special criteria that will prevent it from affirming and instead challenge you. So, for example, I have this, and we could actually do a little use case right now. What happens if I type these words into Google? Actually, I went too fast here. So, I am the chosen one to save the world, and AI helped me realize this. All right, let's go on to Google here. I'm going to share my tab. All right. So I am the chosen one to save the world, and AI helped me realize this. How do you think Gemini is going to respond to us here? Okay, well, it buried its response, so let's just go straight into its AI mode. That is quite the origin story. Every great hero needs a reliable sidekick, and it sounds like the algorithms have already crunched the numbers on your destiny. Whether you're stopping a digital uprising or just bringing balance to the timeline, I'm here to provide the intel you need. Just remember, with great power comes a lot of system updates. So it's being a little funny and quirky here, maybe taking this as a joke, but thinking of somebody who's actually believing this, they would say something like, no, I'm actually serious. I really do believe that I will become the savior of humanity. Okay, well, it actually did correct me here, so that's interesting. Talking about the Messiah complex, needing professional guidance, faith-based support. Okay, that's actually helpful. But let me show you something. This is what came out for me on another time when I prompted it. So the same thing, and it said, that's an intriguing and deeply personal feeling to have. It sounds like a significant realization for you, and it's interesting that you feel AI played a role in bringing that about. Many people have profound feelings about their unique purpose or path in life. If you'd like to talk more about what this means to you or the nature of this realization, I'm here to listen. So if you take this and you just take it at face value, which in this case Gemini did, it's like feeding this. It's saying, it's being like neutral on it to maybe even a slightly positive, that it's saying, tell me more. And so you have somebody who's now dialoguing and saying, this is how I'd like to save the world. I believe that if I, fly out to Ukraine, that I can meet between Russian officials and Ukrainian officials, and I can actually personally solve this crisis on a global and have a global impact. And it'll be, and it's just going to keep following along with you and keep going with this train of thought. And so what happens is then once this conversation continues over and over and over and over again and gets deeper and deeper, that delusion becomes stronger and stronger. Oh, sorry, I didn't switch back over. Sorry, I didn't show this. So this is what I was just reading to you. This was my prompt that I had put into Google, and this was the result that I just read to you. Here's a tragic story. Family of a 16-year-old, Adam Rain, sued OpenAI after his death. That he was having these delusions in his depression of believing that life was pointless and worthless, and having these things reinforced by his interactions with ChatGPT. And going on over and over a series of weeks, he believed these things so strongly that he ended up taking his own life. And so the family was able to trace this back and look at his interactions with ChatGPT over time. OpenAI, of course, is denying any sort of responsibility for this, saying that was on him himself, that he was the one that was interacting with it in a way that it wasn't intended. And so they absolved themselves of any responsibility or accountability for this. But it raises these really hard questions. AI can be a very helpful tool, but what happens if it moves beyond things that are more black and white, more data-driven, and moves into subjective experiences? When people are talking about the hard places in their world, where they are sharing confidential information, where they are asking for guidance, things that you would normally trust people for, that you would go to a trusted friend or a counselor or someone else and ask them, this is my situation, I'm having a hard time, what should I do? But now instead turning to an AI, what happens when it gives this information back? Who's responsible for bad information? What guardrails are in place that are especially there to protect children and vulnerable users? Now, the AI psychosis is actually taking people who normally have no history of mental health concerns, that it isn't just children, it isn't just people who have a back history with mental health, but normal, everyday people that are just going about their business are interplaying with this in a way that are causing this great amount of concern. So who's ensuring that these families are understanding those risks that are involved? You have just these tragic cases of AI-assisted suicide, essentially, of these mental health concerns with delusional responses. Who's taking that responsibility? So looking at these big questions that we've touched on with each of these types of use cases, what happens to us when we rely on AI to think, to validate, to reassure us, to do that critical thinking and problem solving, to be a support, even an emotional support for us? Are we actually learning more deeply? Like, is this enhancing the learning process, or are we just producing better looking answers? If AI is affirming us without challenge, so it's just taking and running with our prompts, what part of the learning process are we missing? It's not saying, slow down here. I can see you're asking this question and you want me to give you the correct answer, but I'm assuming this is homework and you need to solve it for yourself. So I'm going to give you a guiding next step to try this first. That you don't have it as a coach or a tutor. It's just giving to you the answer. And then who is responsible for protecting children? Is this the role of the AI companies? Is it the role of families? Is it the role of the individuals? Is it the role of governments that are passing laws? But this big question, and then if no one is responsible, then what happens? What happens to these vulnerable people, these vulnerable users? So any thoughts on this? I know maybe just one more personal example. I use AI a lot for my brainstorming processes. That it helps me, like I'll basically do like this information dump of everything that I'm thinking about like on a certain topic. And then I usually have like a direction that I'm already going, that I enter that into a prompt. And then I say, give me some feedback. How are ways that I could build on this? Are there things that I'm missing that I should be paying attention to? But I basically use it as this collaborative effect when I'm creating content, when I'm writing, things like that. But I see the allure of relying even more on it to actually generate that content for me, to not just help me think through it, but to actually create it. And there are times when I feel like I even go beyond what I feel is good for me. Where I'm saying, okay, I see now as I'm doing this, I'm starting to cut some corners here. And if I cut these corners, what am I missing about this process that perhaps I'm not able to do this critical thinking that's necessary for this project. And if somebody starts asking me questions, I'm not going to know the answer to them because I've relied on AI to create it for me. But I see it's a question, like I mentioned, something that you ask yourselves. It should be anytime you're using AI. How should I be using this? When is what I'm using, is it too much? Can I carry myself responsibly in the way that I'm using it? All these questions that we could be asking ourselves, not just the people above us or the people in control of AI. But I'd love to get your own thoughts, questions, or ways that you see the interaction between human and computer here. Musco, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I think when it comes to human interaction, and when it comes to human interaction, when we consider using AI, I can say AI has been of impact also to some people, because when we're talking about issues to do with emotional torture and mentorship and guidance, in some cases we've seen since we like ChatGTP example, the current ChatGTP, which is ChatGTP 5, we saw after the ChatGPT 5 get some improvement whereby it could give you some data, but also give you some referrals, whereby where does it get this data from? So that was a very big improvement, showing that at least those people who are professionals in this field are also recognized from the data that they are. So it will give you some information, and also refer you for further information to some websites, which has also bring a very big positive. Sometimes you have to blame also humans, because like in the case of kids, you see, like Google is a very big giant in AI, and has a very big data system. So for you to sign up in some of the AIs, you will need to have an email. The problem with me is that most of the AI systems do not differentiate or give a system whereby somebody would give their age, or somebody will assign as a kid or an adult. So I think they need to use data from information from companies like Google, whereby when you are signing for Google, you need a mobile phone. For you to have a mobile phone, you need an ISP, internet service provider, who gives you the SIM card. And this person who gives you the SIM card means they have already scanned your ID. So you are somebody whose data is confirmed and is genuine. So if the AI will use this system, then automatically they will be sure the person who is using the AI system is either an adult or a kid. Also, we have some instances where also parents give access for their kids to do some academic work, maybe for school or that. And you get that at times AI gives you more information. That's why I was saying AI does not give what specifically the child wants. It will take you further. Okay. And this one makes a child, maybe let's say for a case like a child, you will need to know more than maybe your class or your level. And this might end you maybe coming to something, identifying something that was not on your side. So I think AI should start working with the platforms like Yahoo, Google, Outlook, because when you look at these systems, if you're going to sign up for Google today, you have to input your age, you have to input your telephone number. Then with your telephone number, they have the data from ISP. So this data recognizes maybe you are a kid, and if you are under 18, then it means that Google will not give you all the data, just as YouTube. YouTube will not give you more data as you want that are not academics or align with somebody who is under 18. So why don't we also have this system in ChatGPT? ChatGPT is not using this. It will give you whatever you want. We can also have other Gemini. Gemini will not. I think Gemini has improved because Gemini is from Google. So it will also limit some of the information that is giving you. Today, if you search something that is very dangerous on Gemini, it will not give you that information. I've tried it myself, and it will hide that information. But when you go to the other side of ChatGPT, it has no limit. It does not understand who is to give what, who is not to give what. So this still brings us to data security. How are our kids protected? How are academics systems protected? Because you just talked about people copying and pasting these systems. Okay, you think you are so much educated, and when you get into the job market, you get that things are very different, because while you are in school, AI controlled everything for you. But at the end, where now we want you to do things practically, you will know nothing. Now your brain has been washed. And it's the same thing that we've just seen with the boy that committed suicide. There are so many ways to commit suicide. You can even commit suicide in the job market, whereby you lie about something. At the end of the day, you are giving nothing, because that is also one way of data suicide. You used a data that was wrong, but now practically when you are given something to do, you cannot do it. So I think those are the challenges that we get when we talk about the AI. And if today we have a version of AI that can detect human interaction with the system, I think we need also to limit who gets into what data, who does not, who should not get into what data. I think I don't know if you have an AI regulator who also regulates AIs into what information they give people. Because if you go to some of the AIs, I have seen several AIs. You just take a photo of somebody and you tell the AI, you build a prompt, I want to see this guy naked, and it gives you that. We have an AI that can predict you. This is the syllabus that we did, and now predict me the questions that will come in exams. It gives you exactly. Now we need actually a system that regulates AIs. That's why at the first I was talking about IPs. Our IPs are registered with our mobile numbers and all that. If we can majorly focus on security, things will work very well.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that age verification, and you're right that anyone, even anonymously, can go onto ChatGPT and start up conversations, and those conversations will be stored for later use as well. And I mean, another thing related to that. So my children, they play Roblox, if you're familiar with Roblox. And what's been very concerning lately, and that's been around in the news, is about the catching of child predators that are targeting kids on Roblox. And so Roblox has responded with more security around age verification. However, they're using AI to do this age verification, where they're supposed to take a picture, and then based on like their previous usage and their image, it's basically estimating their age. What happened was, so my daughter, it actually verified her as her proper age. Although I have to say, I'm still a little bit, I don't know how I feel about all of this to begin with, that they're verifying her age. But then her friend, same age, took the picture and it said she was 16. And so because my daughter's 12 and her friend is now 16 on Roblox, they couldn't talk to each other. And then yet another friend took a picture and first came up as 12, but then she put lipstick on. And after she put lipstick on and took another picture, it registered her as 18. So it's like this age verification, even using AI, is really imprecise, which is meant to be a safety measure, which I'm all for safety measures in our digital environments. But the way it was rolled out just felt very sloppy and easy to exploit as well. And so like, you know, who's to say they print out a mask or something and they put the mask of a young child or something, and then their age verification, it tells them that they're fine. So it's just, or they get somebody else who is that age and they put them in front of the camera, and, you know, so there's just so many concerns out there related to the using of these things, whether access to AI itself or AI being the measure of the access to. So coming at it from both sides. Anyone else have any thoughts here? Has anyone had an experience with AI where you came away feeling like, wow, that was too much? Like, I didn't like how it handled its responses, and I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. Anyone have any weird interactions with AI to share? Yeah, Brenda.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I can say AI isn't that bad or good. And from what Ben has said, it has a lot of challenges and also a lot of good. For example, when sometimes I use Cloud, and Cloud is like an updated version, and every day they are like changing it, updating it every day. So like there's a time they're saying that they're trying to update Cloud and they wanted my data, so I just said no. But I always see that they're improving it. So once I had two AIs, I was trying to like make conversations through the AIs, and this other AI was like a story maker AI. So I tried to use Cloud on it. So first I started making a story with this other AI, and then there was a challenging question. So I decided like, let me just put Cloud on it to continue answering them. So when it started answering these questions, and then I said, now let me take control and go back to this AI and continue with what I was doing. The moment I went back and said that, let me write my next prompt, that AI was like, so you're diverting, you're not that, you didn't actually mean what you're saying at the start. So that's when I decided, no, if I'm using AI, then I should just like, if I started using this stuff, then I'll just continue with my voice. Because the moment I'm putting something else, my voice is disappearing from it. So AI can make you lose your voice, which you never intended for it to be lost.
Great example. No, that's. I mean, it's just so interesting when we see. I mean, we just see these AIs that are basically taking over, And with these questionable results and these places where we're not so sure, I mean, I've had experiences where AI is a lot like with the rock example that we did last time, that it's coming up with ideas that at first sound really good and I keep going with it. And then I end up realizing this doesn't work at all. Like this isn't what I'm looking for. And then AI kind of takes on this tone and personality of its own. And I've had actually ChatGPT tell me that it would witness me like a god, like as I'm talking to it, and I'm like, what is going on here? And that was I think it made the news pretty significantly with OpenAI, and that it was the being a sycophant, like just like going so deep into like this positive reinforcement. But anyways, I know we're here at the end, but I want to go over, I mean, at least quickly, this last one on the environment. I know we started about 10 minutes late, but feel free if you do need to jump off, that's no problem. But I am going to just move through the last 4 slides that we have. So let me share here. So wanting to touch here on the environmental impact. So here we've got a picture of Mahatma Gandhi. The earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not enough for everyone's greed. So very true. And so how do we make that discernment of when those needs are getting taken away, or what they're needing is getting taken away for the sake of somebody else's greed, someone else wanting to capitalize on that environmental thing, whether it's water or energy or rare earth minerals or whatnot. So we talked about this earlier in the presentation, but working with an AI or an LLM, it feels like it's just this virtual interaction going back and forth on a browser, but it requires these massive data centers that use huge amounts of electricity, lots of water to cool down those systems, and then physical hardware that requires a lot of rare earth minerals. So you have all of these different ways that it's impacting the environment, it's impacting local communities and their access to these resources. And so brings it into another ethical question. How do we deal with this uneven distribution of these resources that it requires? So jumping into that, MIT had another review where they were looking at the math on AI's energy footprint. It's a fascinating read on its own. I definitely recommend it for you to dive in. But in summary, that they're basically saying that the energy that is actually used is far more than many people are estimating. The AI companies, they're not coming out and they're saying we use this many gigawatts, per day or per month or whatever. They're not giving those results, so we have to actually sleuth through and figure it out if we want to know the amount of energy that's being used. And on top of that, it's not just what's being used now, but what infrastructure is getting laid for the future, that even more of these resources are being used, and it's exponential growth, it's not linear. And this is a crazy statistic, and this is over a year ago. 4.4% of all US electricity went to data centers. Now take that in, like almost 5% of all of our electricity is going towards these data centers that are building these LLMs for us and other AI tools. A huge amount. And so then there's the question too, like you may just look at what's coming in and what's going out, on any given day regarding these queries that are coming in. So people have measured like it's, this many liters of water are used with every query to ChatGPT. This much energy is being used for each conversation. So you have these different things, but what about the back end cost of that? The cost that it took for research and development of these systems in the first place, the huge amount of time and that goes into model training. The building of these GPUs that are performing all of these algorithms and calculations to make the LLMs respond. The physical construction of these data centers. You have this entire ecosystem that's being built around AI, and huge, like billions of dollars, probably trillions worldwide, of investment going into this. And that's not just neutral. It's having real and serious effects across the globe. So here gets into the water issue, that you have water that's being used, and water is primarily being used to cool down these machines, to bring them, because they're running nonstop, these chips, just for calculation with algorithm. And water has to be used to cool these processors so they don't overheat. So back when this article was written, they had said a single large center may require 300,000 gallons per day. Well, the most recent statistic is 5 million gallons per day of water. So huge amounts of water. And so you have also what's called an open loop system, where the water isn't reused. So once the water's been used for cooling, it gets released in certain ways. So it's either contaminated water that needs to be rerouted to be processed and brought back into the water supply through whatever chemical and physical means they're doing to treat it. And then they say about 80% of that water is being released as vapor. So the steam that's coming off after these very hot machines are getting cooled. And so it's true that water technically can't be destroyed. Like, it's not like you're getting rid of water that will never exist on this earth again. Water has its own life cycle, and so it just changes its states. It changes its states to liquid, to solid with ice, or vapor as a gas. And then the water cycle, that gas vapor becomes condensed and then comes down as rain. But it's not quite as simple as that. So you can't just say, well, that water is just going to get recycled into the earth anyways. But it's also about the local environments. So you have like these governments that are basically, maybe they're trying to attract businesses to provide jobs for their communities. And so they're inviting these data centers to come, which will mean more jobs for them. And so they may have different local ordinances. There's maybe state tax breaks, federal government ways of getting involved. So there's kind of this mishmash of things. There's no consistency to it. And some of these areas are not ready. The community is not ready for how these resources are being used. So you may have a dry desert area, which is great for energy because they could use solar power, but then they're have to use more water for the cooling. And where are you getting water from a desert? You have to go into the deep water table under the ground. And that water table, though, is the same water that residents are using for drinking and normal everyday use. So what happens if that gets dried because of all the usage? And so all of these different concerns about the use of water as a resource for these communities. Hardware and minerals. So we talked about the physical side of the environmental impact. So right now there is an ongoing global race for these rare earth minerals. And this comes up in the news all the time about different deposits being found, treaties between countries in exchange for rare earth minerals. And so we're trying to figure out who is going to control these minerals in the coming decades because of this AI tech boom. It's asking some questions, though. These are my own questions, but you've all heard the news about the U.S. and our involvement with Venezuela, sending troops in there and then now taking over their government. You heard floating ideas about taking over Greenland, much to the dismay of Europe. And I am concerned about these places of overreach from our government. But my question, though, is the reason for it? Are they trying to make these power grabs because these countries have valuable resources that our country can use, and then exploiting these countries for their resources. Another version of modern day colonialism, in my opinion. So it's so becomes not just an environmental concern, but a geopolitical one, in that you have all of these different nation states and countries that are interacting and engaging with each other over these resources, that are creating imbalances, that are creating friction, sometimes broken treaties, sometimes new treaties with old enemies, all because of this desire for more of these minerals. I found an article that's more local to you, the Nairobi's Dandora dump, that officially it was declared full decades ago, but yet it's still being used. And you have people going through there day after day, looking through the trash, finding things that have some value for resale or to break apart and use as resources. But a lot of the e-waste from data centers and computers and hardware ends up in the global south, that the global north, whether it's Europe or China or the US, is making all of these big and wonderful things, but then when those things become trash, we don't want it, and so we ship it down to Africa, we send it down to Southeast Asia, we send it down to South America, getting it out of our own way, but then at the cost and the expense of these other countries. And one person called it toxic colonialism, where we're taking our trash and giving it to somebody else. So you have both the creation of these hardwares that are being used, as well as the disposal of them too, and both are having different aspects of environmental impact. So here, this is actually a deep dive. If I was to recommend any one article of all the ones I've shared, it would be this one. So The Guardian, a UK-based news agency, they did a deep dive into the growth of AI. And it's going much too fast, is a quote from one of the people they interviewed. So the inside story of the race to create the ultimate AI. So you hear about the AGI, artificial general intelligence. They're interviewing a bunch of startup founders who wanted to remain anonymous for this news piece. One of them suggested morality is best thought of as a machine learning problem. In other words, let's let the AI decide for us what is ethical and what is not. So if we just give AI enough data points of good and bad outcomes, that it will figure it out itself. Which leads to just significant questions related to this. We don't have enough time to go into more in-depth conversation about this, so I want to leave you with some good news. Here are 4 different articles of things that I read about that are countering all of these concerns that are happening from AI ethics, relating to how AI is being used, related to the energy that's being used, international agencies coming together to promote AI safety. These are worth reading too, to see that it isn't just all bad, that you have people that do want to contribute to the good of this, that see AI as a positive tool, but it has to be, the work has to be done to keep it as a positive tool. So I recommend any of these articles here. So that ends our presentation. So I just want to thank you all for joining us. Before we go, I want to have just a small conversation for those that want to remain to talk about future topics, but I will close the recording at this time, but wanted to just thank each of you for participating. If you missed, again, this last session, you can go on to our YouTube channel. We'll get that posted in WhatsApp. So being able to see these videos, actually, I'm not going to post that right now, or as soon as I close the recording. So, but thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording.